I mean, if you want me to just to make a square box, I won't do it. I'll put something in there. We just finished this project that was probably nuts. I felt like I was in a Werner Herzog movie, Fitzcarraldo. How do you use the sauna? Do you know that it's actually a bathhouse? It felt so good in there. Why? Why? They weren't importing California or Oregon cedar in 1935. The code book has about this much on sauna. You could make a sauna out of a cardboard box if you wanted to.
Guess who's coming to sauna? Hekilunta. Guess who's coming to sauna? Hekilunta.
So, hello everyone. It is a Sunday evening and it's getting chillier here in New York. I was actually doing a little bit of sauna, in this case, banya. Yesterday in New York City, I went with my son and it was an exciting trip. We actually visited two places before we ended up where we went. Anyway, life is good. Sam, what's going on? You have survived, as we know.
Yeah, we're just finally cleaning up here after Hurricane Helene came through. Everything with Hurricane Milton, down in Florida. So, thoughts and prayers are going out to everybody affected to that. But we're faring just fine now. We're back into normal rhythm, and having a sauna here, is just been a blessing. So it's my little slice of normalcy, regardless if I've got power or not, which is nice because we finally got some cooler temps here in the southeast. With all this weather that we've been having, it's now finally cooling off. The leaves are falling, and things are nice in autumn. So just in time for Halloween. Looking forward to it. Risto, what are you going to be for Halloween?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe I'll dress up like a Finnish sauna goer.
There you go. All you need is your birthday suit and a sauna hat.
That's right, and a ladle. I'll just carry around my big ladle. Yeah, it is definitely getting cooler here. I'm actually looking forward to I think I'm gonna sauna tonight.
Definitely bound to weather.
Yeah, definitely. Fall is a great time.
Yeah.
It's good to see you guys again, and we're joined by a special guest for this episode, Rob Light. And Rob runs a sauna company on the East Coast, and I followed his work for quite some time, especially his blog, which in preparation for this episode, I just went back and was reading a few of your posts. And so we're excited to have you on and kind of learn your story of how you ended up creating a sauna company and got so far into the weeds with it all. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, thank you. It's really exciting to be here, and I just love sharing everything I know about sauna and sharing my experience with everybody. And it's great having found, like through NAS, a community of like-minded folks. It's been a strange trip, I tell you. I mean, especially since the pandemic, when suddenly my phone just wouldn't stop ringing. All my friends were taking days off and weeks off and working at home and everything, and suddenly I'm just working full time and full bore into it. But my story starts way 50 years ago, way back. And I grew up in a town called Trumansburg, upstate New York, not far from here. And there was a little hamlet outside of Trumansburg actually called Podunk. And it's a real place, not a fictitious town. And Podunk basically was about 5 houses, and one of them was owned by this Finn named Ozzy and his family. And Ozzy came over here from Finland to share Finnish culture, and he had a Nordic ski center, which was also as strange as sauna back then. And we actually had a little ski team, and we all, we just loved that and just totally into it. But he also had a sauna, and the farm that he had bought had actually been built in the 30s by a Finnish immigrant from the Midwest. And as you know, a lot of the Finns actually went to the Midwest. They were miners and farmers and lumbermen. And then they kind of all got convinced to move back to this area. Not all of them, but a lot of them moved in mass in upstate New York. And Ozzy had bought this farm particularly because it was built by a Finn. And as was typical, the Finn, Willie Uti, built the sauna first. And so we actually had the oldest existent sauna in the region at this place called Podunk. And so I started going there as a teenager, and I became good friends with the family. Ozzy's wife was my art teacher in middle school, and I'm still great friends with her. So I've had a deep, deep connection to this place called Podunk and the sauna that was there.
How old were you? I'm just curious, how old were you when you first experienced that sauna?
Probably about 13.
Okay.
Yeah. So do the math, 15, 13. Yeah, I'm 63. Um, and it's just been so big part of my life ever since then. I continued to go there during college. Even I would come home or afterwards. I settled back in the area after college, and we continued to go to Podunk, and then till eventually I built my own sauna. And also, I was an artist, so I went to art school and I learned how to weld. I learned how to make things. I was always very much working with my hands, and it's typical of most, especially sculptors, can't really make money making sculpture, so you go into the trades. So a lot of my artist friends, we all went into the trades. And so was doing home building. I was doing mostly renovation and doing all different trades. I mean, I've dabbled with masonry, ornamental plaster, sign painting, welding, frame construction, drywall, house painting, you name it. And in fact, Ozzy was a house painter originally. He came over here and he actually taught me how to paint houses too. So I have this complicated history of being an artist, being a tradesperson, being a Nordic skier, and at the center of all of this was sauna. Everything I did after a while I realized revolved around sauna, and especially since I grew up Catholic, and I realized one day after I left the church when I was probably 17 or 18, like a lot of kids did. I realized one day I'd been to sauna more times than I'd been to church. And so that was a big moment for me, realizing like sauna was my new church. And we always treated sauna with that kind of reverence. It was like, it was fun. And we had the boys would go and the girls would go. We would hang out afterwards and the Saturday night sauna. We did a lot of things that were probably traditional in Finland. And we were, picking up on those traditions and all of that. But we always held it with reverence, like this is the sauna. You sort of took it seriously at the same time. It was a lot of fun. And then the way we experienced it was very traditional. There was a dressing room, there was a hot room, there was a hot water tank. So there was the whole bathing thing. So we've always bathed in there. We would run down to the creek for our cool downs, which was always fun. Or sometimes in the winter, we'd slap on our skis and we would skis and nothing else, that is, and ski out into the woods. A lot of nudity, of course, and just a lot of just that kind of frolicking, but really the experience of the extremes, the hot and the cold. We would use the sauna when we were training. So we did like this Canadian ski marathon as a team, and we would sauna every day for a week beforehand. And, it was just so much to us. And then eventually, so I was building and I was doing, renovation projects and some house building and all kinds of, work on the trades. And I talked to my other buddies who are carpenters. We got to build a sauna. We got to build a sauna. So finally, we built the first one like in 1995 as kind of a business venture, like let's start a sauna company. And it just started something for me. And so I also was teaching a lot too. I actually ended up teaching at a local college, teaching art, but that was only part time. So in the summers, I continued to build and I would build saunas and I would do bathrooms and I would do other things that were related. But more and more, I began to focus on sauna. And so when I would do the saunas, I would build them, but I would also incorporate all of that experience I had as a carpenter. So I was a carpenter building saunas. I was a sauna maker, who had all these other skills. And the great thing about sauna is it's like a little house. It's got everything a house has. It's got a foundation, it's got a roof, you got a stove in there, you got a chimney, you got masonry. I was doing a I still am doing cement floors. There's a lot of metal work involved, not just with the stove, but there's a lot of details. And then there's working with lumber, so like one of my buddies was a sawyer. So, cutting up trees and working with lumber right off the land and working with raw materials. And the thing I noticed about the sauna at Podunk and all the other saunas around here from all the Finns that settled here, they were poor farmers. They weren't wealthy. They weren't ostentatious. I mean, the sauna was a very kind of humbling place. And in fact, if you talk to the Finns around here, there's a Finnish society. Most of them don't even talk about their sauna, and they never boast about it. They never brag about their sauna. They never say, what's a good sauna, what's a bad sauna. it's just something that's just part of life.
Mm.
And so that's something that's been hard to, hard to deal with in this whole explosion of interest in sauna. Because Eero, as you know, like Finns don't really talk about much at all, actually.
Yeah, I'm laughing. I'm laughing
Yeah,
because
I remember Ozzy he was actually an intellectual and an artist, and he actually got a grant from the Ford Foundation for like $35,000 to explore building like an eco community. And he showed me he was so proud. He showed me his cover letter. His cover letter was, "Thank you. We are ready to begin." That was it. That was it.
Love it.
Like, 3 words. I mean, it's like that is so Finnish. And so here we are, I mean, I'm not a Finn, I'm a non-Finn, and embracing sauna and celebrating it and getting so enthusiastic about it, and we just wanna climb a mountain and get to the top and just, extol the virtue of sauna to everybody. So that is not like a Finnish thing. But everything else that I'm doing is kind of based on that Finnish tradition. So I'm trying to reconcile that. And it's hard because, Scarlett, who's my fiance and partner and everything I'm doing, she does all the design and the web stuff. And in fact, if you've read a post by me or seen images I've posted online, I don't she does all that for me. I mean, I write the content. I build the content. I take the photos, but she puts it online and stuff. And it's like we talk about it. It's like, do we really want to be like on Instagram every day and putting stories up? And we see all these other people that are doing it, and it's just like we just want to be humble sauna people. We don't want to have to do it. But at the same time, I found myself in this position where suddenly it's like it's everything I do now. In fact, I'm not even making art. I have this big beautiful shop, and all I'm making is sauna. It's great on one hand, but on the other hand, it's like I just want to be that humble sauna maker who's, hey, come to my sauna and we'll share it. And so there is a real conflict there with the American approach to sauna that I'm trying to reconcile in myself. So it's been a trip, and especially since the pandemic. Suddenly I had a web page up thanks to Scarlett, and then people just started finding it. And suddenly we had good SEO, and I mean I'm getting calls from all over the world. We just had a class. It was great. We just got someone else being on the list. So they're from Melbourne. They're gonna come here to my little town to take my class. It's like, and then I asked myself, how did this happen?
That's wonderful. No, that's great. It's great that it's such an international community now.
Yeah, it is.
Um,
It is.
Rob, I can just, I can hear that passion. I am almost scared for you, that you're maybe not doing so much art, more sauna. Now, how are you incorporating that into sauna? Are you using different materials or are you getting creative
Oh
with
yeah.
sauna?
I mean, if you want me to just to make a square box, I won't do it. I'll put something in there. I mean, we just finished this project that was probably nuts. I felt like I was in a Werner Herzog movie, Fitzcarraldo. This boat. We did a sauna boat, not just a floating sauna, but a fully functional navigational boat with electric motors for this guy who's a little crazy about sauna, but he wanted to do it, and we did it. And we all the details we do, like round windows. We spent weeks on just these round porthole windows and the little touches and little details and even the towel hooks. Everything that we do is with that same passion that I would put into sculpture. So everything, it for me, it just has to be like that. Like every project, even though they're kind of, I'm trying to repeat myself a lot, they're all different. They're all unique. Everyone is a baby that we send out into the world, and it's not Costco. And each project that we do takes a couple months. So it's really hands-on, and it's funny, I got a meeting tomorrow with somebody, and they're like, "Well, pleased to meet your team." I'm like, "Well, it's not plural, it's just me and Scarlett helps out, I mean, it's really just the 2 of us. Sometimes I get some helpers, but yeah, it's great, and it's nuts, and it just keeps us really busy, and I am looking forward to the day when I can just go back and maybe make some funky sculpture.
let me stop you there. Now you have these customers that have all these special requests. How often do you bump into people in your trade who clearly can't understand what they're buying or what it's used for?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, so I both working with the actual, the end client. The first thing I do is actually I meet with them and I find out what their experience is. Or are you of the Russian, kind of banya experience? Are you the Swedish experience or the Finnish experience? I find out how do you use the sauna? Do you know that it's actually a bathhouse? You know, you can actually bathe in there. And I say, even if you don't think you're ever going to like take a bucket of water and pour it over your head, at some point, you're going to have a Finnish friend come over and they're going to start throwing water around. So it really is a to convince people it's a wet space, convince them that you don't just have to sit there like you're in church, that you can lounge, that there's many different positions, and that, you might want it a little hotter, so I always make them so that they have the possibility of going hot and of using lots of water. But the other problem I have, is a lot of times I work with general contractors. So someone might be building a home gym, like I'm doing one now. It's a home gym, and there's a general contractor, and okay, you frame up the room, and you get someone else to do the tile work, but trying to just get them to understand what it's about, and like, no, you can't put that in there because it's going to be 200 degrees. That material is going to melt, or that material is not going to work, or just trying to get them to understand how the whole thing works. Like I'm working on a project in Atlanta right now, just consulting, and the first drawing from the architect, he had this, it's like a loft space and upstairs of a house, and they're basically tearing half of it down to renovate it. He's got 18-foot ceiling in the sauna. Right? It's like, okay, a little red flag there. Okay, he doesn't really understand sauna, so you have to educate them and get them to understand. You want your head to be up there in the heat. You don't need all that space above you, and so that's a real challenge. Getting contractors, and then getting the homeowners on board too. But sometimes I just give up. I did a project. I get a lot of people from New York City who moving up to the country to the Catskills, and I did a project a couple years ago. It actually took like a year start to finish. And this guy wanted this thing, and he had an architect. And the first drawing was like this sloping ceiling where the low point was where the stove was, and it goes up. So it was about 11 feet ceiling. So you have about 10 feet. You have all this room above the upper bench. I'm just like, no, no, just make it flat. Don't get fancy here. Make it functional.
Yeah, speaking of the difference between like the American and Finnish conception of sauna, I'm just curious to hear from you because I think you're the only one of us four who maybe can speak to this very well because you said you got into sauna about 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So it hit its big boom in the 60s and 70s in the United States. It started to become very popular. But then, it's my understanding that probably started to slowly fade in the 80s and 90s. Like, what did you notice about that? Were you paying attention to that American conception of sauna and and what happened with it?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff came out of California, and the one thing that has really been interesting is trying to rediscover that early sauna, and everything I build and design kind of goes back to my experience at Podunk, and we always talked about it felt so good in there. Why? 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 We're always curious about what was the insulation, how did they build it? So last year, almost a year ago today, the family stones it. Ozzy passed away years ago, but the son-in-law actually kinda owns it, and he's a builder. But we decided that the squirrels had just taken over, and the thing was rotting into the ground, and it's really like a historic structure. So we very carefully took it apart, and we saved all the pieces. We actually cut the front off and saved it. We're gonna reuse it. And in taking it apart, we discovered how it was built. And it's really interesting. And this is also true for another sauna that's near us that's used to be a big group sauna. There's no cedar in there. They weren't importing California or Oregon cedar in 1935. These were poor farmers. They were using what they had at hand. And what I've discovered is that these saunas were actually plastered. So the one at Podunk was actually built with what was then called beaver board, which would be coated with not with just paint, but with a plaster. And so this idea of a sealed surface that was keeping the heat in and also keeping the moisture in. And then for insulation at Podunk, I did a blog post on it. It was actually cereal boxes, Kellogg's cornflakes and Wheaties, right? Not the small box, but the case box. And we were actually able to pinpoint the date of the sauna exactly because the logos change so frequently, and there's a database. So it was 1935. Willow Yuti lined the inside the walls of his sauna with these boxes. But anyhow, getting back to your question about how things change. So I noticed, in the 70s there were all these kits coming from California, and they're all just, the emphasis was on cedar. And just this interior lining, which I think came out of, the California and the hot tub culture and all of that. And the cedar industry has done a great job marketing cedar. It's practically the only wood you can get these days that people are using for sauna. And I've actually given up, and it's pretty much the only wood I'm using right now because it's hard to convince people otherwise. Um, so that's the one thing, and then but with no understanding of what's behind the cedar. So a lot of these kits were built, they're using like blue foam maybe or nothing or no foil or no understanding of the building science. And a lot of these saunas from the 70s, I know I've gone into houses and people are like, "I got an old sauna, can you fix it? Can you know, sauna was converted to a closet, can you convert it back or something?" They were so poorly built that just didn't understand. They're just putting a door, they're making a closet kind of space, or putting, like a door on it made out of cedar, maybe. They're putting cedar on the walls. They're not doing anything in there to deal with the trapping the heat or the moisture to control the humidity. And they were just hot boxes. And you see these and a lot of these were turned into kits. You see them in hotels, you see them in gyms, just so poorly made. And a lot of them either just fell into complete disrepair, or maybe they've been limping along, especially with the gyms and stuff, just poorly built. So I'm trying to rediscover the way the sauna should be really made, even questioning my own practice every day. Like, should we use plaster maybe? Does it make sense? I mean, you want to sit on a wooden bench. The cedar on it's nice, it smells nice. But what's really key is, making sure that there's a foil layer in there to trap that humidity. What came out of the 70s also was this idea, and they're all mostly electric saunas that people were building, is that the sauna is dry. There's no moisture in there. And architects too, they don't understand there's a lot of moisture in a sauna. Maybe it's momentary. Maybe you do lulu and you put the water on the rocks. When I put the water on the rocks, I love it the first time I do it. The door goes poof. Like it's so much vapor pressure, the door actually, pushes out like a ghost is trying to enter. And you try to explain that to architects, like you've got to be really conscious of where that moisture is going if you're building a sauna in a house. There's so much in building science about vapor control now, and houses are really tight. And so if you don't do it right, you're just going to have something that's going to cause all kinds of problems in as little as 5 or 10 years.
And if we only focus on the structure and the technical bit, and you mentioned this earlier, but not the practice aspect of it, then it's easy for, whatever the market does, you end up with saunas that you can't sauna bathe in. You can't really even sauna in it. So, one thing that's on my mind, and Arrow and Sam know I constantly bring this up, is we have all this interest in sauna right now. I'm curious, what do we do to kind of foster that interest in a direction where we're not just constantly going up and down with
Yeah.
the sauna trends?
Yeah. And it's a challenge because, like, the code book has about this much on sauna. But if you're looking at other aspects of building, there's just reams and reams of data and code and, standard practices. But with sauna, it's just the Wild West. And the other thing with sauna is it's one of those things that just it kind of lends itself to DIYers. And part of that is because I think it's sort of that California culture, everyone just started building their own things. And a lot of hippie houses that were built in the 70s that, now are falling apart. People didn't really know what they were doing. They thought carpentry was easy. Hey, I got a hammer and a nail. And carpentry and building has become so complex. You practically need a PhD to become a contractor, or just, years and years or years of experience. But to constantly update that experience with new information. Like I follow like Journal of Light Construction, and there's a place called the Building Science Corporation, and this guy, Joe Listerbrook, and he's amazing. He writes about everything. Although I've written him and tried to get him to write specifically about sauna, and he mentioned it very very briefly in one post about wine cellars. But to really get someone like him to really analyze the sauna and talk about, like, I've heard on there's a lot of stuff online. There's a lot of bro science happening online. Um, one I won't name names, but someone saying there's no vapor movement in a sauna. It's like, there's no vapor movement? Are you kidding me? It's like people don't understand the science behind it. It's like if you leave a tea kettle on the stove for too long, all the windows in your house are steamed up. How does that happen? The kitchen is like way downstairs and suddenly the whole house is steamed up. And that's vapor pressure. The vapor pressure will push moisture through a brick wall. I actually learned it pushes it through steel. So all my early steel sculptures were hollow forms, and they would fill up with water. And it's like, how's that water getting in? My welds are watertight, and it's vapor pressure. So you learn to put a hole in the bottom. You learn, let that moisture out. So building science is really, really complicated, and people are just catching up to it with building houses. But with saunas, it's way behind because mostly the culture is kind of DIY, and or contractors just have no idea. They've never done one. They don't know what they're doing, and the science hasn't addressed it. So it'd be really great if the building science folks really started to address sauna. There should be a manual for architects.
Many architects are not really interested because they think that they know, but they don't know, and
Yep.
that's kind of the
Yep.
problem that we are having here. And it's kind of, I as along the same lines. It's interesting that that I obviously totally 100% agree with you what you just said about, and you mentioned the hot boxes. I don't call them hot boxes anymore. I call them dry boxes to stress that part out. But I stepped down a few months ago, but I was running the North American Sauna Society for
Yeah.
15 years, and the demand for these dry boxes is huge. Most of the players in the game do understand that they personally they use like a real sauna, but the product that they sell is a dry box.
It's right.
And it's like, you already mentioned how we got there. The Finnish folks, they just, this is my thing. I'm gonna keep it to myself. And then there was a void, and some other people filled the void.
Yeah.
And here we are, and obviously what we try to achieve. Part of the mission is with the upper bench. We try to get people to listen that there is this thing called sauna, which is way more than what you have, even though you have this thing called sauna.
Right. And yeah, and understanding how it works. So like everything I do in my design addresses the function being a bathhouse. You want this soft heat coming at you from the entire room. I've actually developed a stove over the years. I mean, I started making this stove 35 years ago, and I've been refining and refining the design. In fact, we're actually going to take it into production, hopefully, where you don't see the front of the stove fires from outside. I grew up with that at Podunk, and it seemed to make so much sense. It's like you tend the fire from outside, you keep all the ash and all that stuff outside. And when the ladies were in the sauna, the boys could go out and be nice gentlemen and feed the fire for them and that kind of thing. So you maintain that kind of privacy. So the focus of the sauna wasn't like the fire, which so many Americans seem to like. They like to, to sit in front of the fire. And when I sit in front of the fire, I think of like you're sitting around the wood stove, drinking a beer and hanging out, and the front of you is warm and the back of you is cold. So my focus is on the rocks, which for me, the Savu sauna that's the gold standard. I need to go to Finland and take one. But I understand what that's about. It's like this thermal mass. When you take a Savu sauna, there's no fire. The fire has been put out a long time, and it's been aired out, and it's the rocks that emanate that heat. And so that's part of the functionalities, having these rocks that are about 400 degrees. And it's that kind of heat that comes from the rocks. And it gets complicated, but it's not. It's just very simple. And to keep the focus on that. And when you're in the sauna, you're just facing the stove and taking turns with the kippo, putting ladles of water on. And to me, that's what it's about. So everything I do addresses that function.
So Rob, I mean, run me through, you've got a Sunday afternoon, it's wide open, you're gonna sauna. Run me through your routine at home there. What have you got cooking and, how are you using it?
I mean, it's actually pretty laid back. It's just kind of like, oh, you gotta go light the sauna. Okay. It only takes 10 minutes or so to light it. We go out there and grab some firewood and put it in the stove. Whoever's lighting it will check out the inside of the sauna and make sure that you get some fresh buckets of water. Make sure no one left a wet towel on the bench. Clean things up. I have a dip tank. Maybe I'll make sure that that's full enough or the leaves haven't fallen in it. Then we just light it and kind of walk away. And sometimes we get busy, and sometimes we'll light it before dinner and wait till later because it depends. We got kids, and the schedule gets complicated, but it's really fairly laid back, and sometimes we even forget about it. And I light it, and I like to light it so just aggressively, just get that thing hot, we just stoke it up. And of course, we got tons of cedar kindling. Can't tell you how much cedar kindling I have.
Yeah.
We've actually gone out there and maybe we're not in communication, like, maybe I'll throw an extra log on, and maybe Scarlett will think, "Oh, I should throw an extra log on." We've actually gone out there, it's been 240 degrees. We're like, "Uh-oh, that's a little hot," you know?
I've been there.
But it's pretty laid back, and then it's like, "Okay, it's sauna hot. Okay, then," we gather up, we get our towels, and we go out there, and it's great. Scarlett's daughter, Bella, is now, 7. She loves to go out there too. To me, that epitomizes the sauna experience. It's a family thing. I mean, she's there on the floor playing with the water, watching our feet, but she loves it too.
And she'll be able to say that she grew up with it, and hopefully that's getting passed down, and yeah, finds that enjoyment and can share it with others. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's multi-generational, and I also think the building, the physical structure itself should be multi-generational. So when I build these saunas for people, I tell them your grandkids are gonna enjoy it, even if you don't have kids yet. So it's that longevity is really important part of it for me, and it's not just something, a quick box that you put together. I mean, I'm sure for some people, you just want a sauna. You could make a sauna out of a cardboard box if you wanted to. I mean, the Finns do it all the time. They're making saunas out of foam boots and whatever. Just, it's just fun stuff. But when I really build one for someone, that's the best saunas. You have a place by the lake or with a pond or something, something the family's going to enjoy for years and years and years to come. And it's going to bring the whole family together.
Yeah, you talked about that amazing heat and steam that you're chasing from that old podunk sauna. Yeah, I think there is something about once they age, just let a
Yeah,
sauna age 50, 60 years and it's got some old curtains on the window and the heat,
exactly.
it's going to be great.
And in a lot of my experience also relates to things I learned in art school, like we did kiln building and, dealing with much hotter temperatures, obviously, thousands of degrees, but understanding heat flow and heat transfer and stuff. And the best kilns are the old kilns because they're leaky. And so the heat just kind of goes everywhere. And I actually build that into, especially the freestanding sauna where you're not worried about moisture getting into the rest of the house because that is an issue. But in a freestanding sauna, you just kind of let it breathe. I actually build cracks into the thing. I mean, they're not everywhere, but they're specifically placed. So the whole thing has a trickle vent near the roof wall juncture. Of course, there's some sort of vent or window, and like the floor of the mobiles, it's just boards. You can see the snow in the wintertime. You look down there, right? And people think, "Oh, don't you need to seal it up?" It's like, no, you want the thing to breathe. That's what made Podunk great it was airy, but at the same time it was tight and hot. So that's a misconception that I have to constantly educate people about. You want the air to flow. I tell them, think about your oven at home, you're baking bread. Why is there hot air coming out of the back of your oven? It doesn't make sense, right? Don't you want the oven to be, no, you want that convection. You want that flow. You want the air to move around and circulate. So trying to build that natural convection into it, sometimes it's a challenge educating people about that. I always laugh when you go to the gym. Most of the gyms that I service, I've had to put a vent in under the heater. It's not so much about the bathers, but the heaters will fail. The elements and the electronics get too hot. And every time you go back to the gym, you just have to close your eyes and shake your head. Somebody's like stuffed a towel in that vent opening because they think it's cooling the room off. It's actually moving the heat around. They don't understand it. So, that kind of thing, and educating the gym owners or the managers who typically don't even take sauna, in my experience.
Mhm.
They're not in there, as to how it should operate. That's a whole nother thing there too, is, educating. But now, I mean, now it's great. We have places that are public saunas that are built for that purpose by people who obviously love it and understand it and appreciate it. That's a wave too that's really great, taking over.
Well, you mentioned a little bit here. I'm going to plug our sponsor for this episode of The Upper Bench, Kreamy Soaps. I'm going to ask a question here related to it. Are you using soap in a sauna, Rob?
Oh God, yes, yes, yes. So you go into the sauna and usually there's a lower bench or somewhere, and there's going to be scrub brushes. There's going to be we use the pine soap, the sauna soap from Finnish. There might be a shampoo. There might be a shaving brush. Best place to shave. If you shave in the sauna when it's hot. There's going to be a razor there. There's going to be a couple buckets to mix water. I actually was making a water tank that hang on the side of the stove, but my stainless welding is not what it used to be. And it's like we just get a steel bucket and put it on the rocks. So you get hot water. So you got a couple buckets to mix. Then you got smaller ladles that you can pour over your head. So all kinds of means of cleaning and scrubbing. The loofahs are great. And so, yeah, the soap, you gotta have the soap.
That's awesome. No, absolutely. We love it. We've got the pine tar soap. I know Eero and Risto have been using theirs. I've been using mine. I used mine even when I didn't have power. Hey, a hose and a bar of soap, sometimes that's what you got, you got to make do. No, I love it, Rob. I mean, it sounds like you're using a lot of water. What are you doing for drainage? And what is your recommendation for people that are looking to maybe build a sauna? Should they have maybe they're looking to even pour a foundation. Should they rough something in?
Yeah, always incorporate a drain if possible. I mean, there's situations like if someone's working in like an existing basement and there's no drain and your basement is below grade and your sewer is above you. Yeah, sure, it's you just gonna have to mop up the extra water there. I always encourage people to put a drain in, and a outdoor building. I'm doing like a cement floor that slopes to a drain, kind of like a shower pan with a membrane. If there's a separate tiler on the job, like a subcontractor, where there's a general contractor, I tell them treat it like a shower pan, up the wall 4 inches, because you don't want that. It's not just water, it's sweating, it's gross. You don't want that getting into the framing. You don't want that getting in the structure. So always encourage your drains. Now, a lot of times, if it's a freestanding building, the drain, I just say drain to air. And I have to whisper that sometimes because there's building inspectors around and they might hear you say that. So some building inspectors will say, oh, it's got to go to a septic system, which is going to add like $10,000 to the job. So I just tell it's very discreet and draining out to air or maybe to like a French drain or something. I have literally had a building inspector come, and I've had my foot in the middle of the room covering the drain and just kind of pivoted around while he looked at stuff. Another trick I've done is do like this cement floor, which is a thin pour cement to a drain. I've actually put a piece of paper over the drain and skimmed right over it so you don't see it. And
There you
inspect
go.
you should
I love it.
take top it out, right? So
Otherwise, I mean, you could do maybe a really tight knit duct board. You could put something in there. Hey, nobody's gonna see it.
yeah, and it is covered with there's duct boards on the floor often. And then like for the mobiles and for some structures, like we just did a drop in place, it's simply just a deck, a wooden deck with air gaps in it. The water will drain out.
That's great.
Yeah, it's just let the water flow. You don't want to have it like just sitting underneath the sauna because it's gonna stink.
Yeah, yeah, you gotta have some kinda either, yeah, crushed rock, like you said, a French drain. Yeah, you have some drainage. We've talked about that in other episodes when talking about planning for your sauna. Make sure you're not putting these things where there's, gonna be standing water. Don't put it in the low spot of your lawn where it's soft and water pools, make sure you're caring for the drainage.
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
and that's the first thing I do anyhow if I'm doing a freestanding. I'm gonna come in with some sort of small excavator or something because I don't dig footer holes by hand anymore. And up here we got 4 feet to frost, so you got it, pretty deep hole. So I always use that time to put drainage out, look at the site, assess it, and make sure it's all well drained and everything. And then if it's in a house, if I can get on the project at the right time, I tell them make a drain, try to get it to hook up to your septic system somehow, to your sewer system. Like right now, I'm doing one with a basement, with the gym I mentioned, when there's a shower, and they're gonna be cutting concrete anyhow. So it's just like, okay, you guys just, let's hook it up. And now people want dip tanks too, so that's a problem too. The dip tanks, there's a lot of water there.
oh, heck of a lot. You gotta care for that.
Yeah. And if you're on the third floor of a house, oh boy. And some of the houses would probably, they're more than my insurance. So I gotta be really careful if I spec something and then the water's gonna get everywhere. So I really gotta make sure that those are bulletproof in terms of water control.
100%.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk a lot about drains in these episodes, and I just want to point out that in my 39 first years before I moved to the U.S., I've never ever experienced a sauna without the drain, not once. And now I have, but I can't like come back from the whatever it's called to the dry sauna. I can't, like, it doesn't work that way. You can elevate yourself from the dry sauna to the real deal, but not the other way around, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Even going to a gym, like where I have to go there because I'm maintaining the sauna and I go in there and it's just like I shake my head, it's like, I'm never gonna sit in there.
Yep, my sister-in-law sent me some photos this week. She was on a field trip with her kids, and they had a Finnish sauna on the farm. So, like, she sent me pictures. She was excited. I was excited. I was like, "Hey, can you get me pictures inside?" So she's like, "I'll see. It's locked up." She got me some pictures inside. Turns out there was carpet in the hot room, though. I'm not sure how Finnish it was.
Yeah. You see stuff like that and you shake your head.
Yeah, that's a no-go.
I mean, people sweat in there, I sweat a lot.
Oh yeah, and we'd mentioned before, I've got a wood burning sauna in my shop, and I built it on top of the concrete slab, and I wasn't about to drill a hole in the concrete slab and do a bunch of extra work. I was trying to do it on a budget. So, I have to kind of be a little bit sparingly in the water usage. I'm not pouring a bucket of water over my head anytime soon, but I've got a hose on the outside of the shop that works just fine. And so, I kind of use a lot of water outside of the sauna, but I still can, pour plenty of water on there. And hey, if it does get to be a little bit too much where it's maybe pooling or something like that, grab an old towel, wipe it up. That concrete will dry and suck it up pretty fast.
The other thing I found with a lot of old basements and garages that there are perimeter drains. There are drains there you can access. Maybe they're not to the septic, but they're foundation drains. So I've tied into those too, which isn't necessarily legal, but that's worked in many cases. We're finding a slope to the floor that works, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
If I mean, if you bathe in there with hot water, so your pores are wide open, and you scrub, and you do that last rinse, and so we usually do three rounds or more, but a hot round at the beginning, then a second round, and then the third round we always bathe, and you get that rinse off when your skin is hot, that you're never going to get cleaner. I prefer that over taking a shower any day in terms of cleanliness. Just the simplicity of it. Sitting there on a low bench with a bucket and going back to the 19th century. It's really nice. So if you can experience that, that's great. And then you go outside and go cool off or whatever you're gonna do.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right, exactly. And that's the great thing about sauna. People have been doing this for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're trying to reinvent the wheel here, but you don't have to.
Yeah, you really don't have to. You really do not have to, and it's kind of interesting how people try though. It's just like there's a lot of innovation going on, all kinds of innovations going, and it's probably good, but at the same time you wanna like keep an eye on the thing that it's still the original one, which works the best. And if that innovation is gonna take people to the old school ways of doing things, then it's totally fine. But there's not, there's a and this is also what we talk about a lot. There's a lot of different kinds of thermotherapy, and that's awesome. That's great. But at the same time, I don't know. Maybe I'm so used to. That was actually a couple of weeks back. I was in mid part of Finland, and I did exactly what you were telling us about. I did the old school, bucket thing and the hot water. There's a hot water heater. My father-in-law has a hot water heater.
Yeah, it's a separate heater actually.
Yeah, yeah. And it was dark and it was beautiful. The water was a little too cold for my taste, but I mean at the in the lake.
Yeah, I had a client recently American Finn, who wanted to recreate their old family sauna back in the homeland. So she sent me a video of it, and I just had to laugh because she's walking around. You come in, there's the sitting room, and that had a fireplace, and you go to the bathing room, and then she panned over, and on the corner there was like a rack, one of those hanging things, baskets with like 50 different kinds of shampoo because that's their extended family, that each bottle represented a different person, and it was the only place that you could bathe on the cottage site. So they all bathed there.
And if they don't have your brand, you gotta bring your own.
Yeah, and then there was like, 50 different buckets, it seemed like. Everyone had their own favorite color of plastic wash basin. And it just cracked me up because that's what I grew up with too. There's all these basins and bins and things in the sauna, and you rarely see that in the typical American sauna. You rarely see any accoutrements really.
Mhm.
The buckets, the kippas, the sauna pillows, the vitas, all the stuff that we have in ours.
But that's what Risto said back in the day. You said on one of our episodes that when you see like a shampoo and a bar of soap, then you know that for real.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
the real deal.
yep, that's right. It's what it's all about.
Well, Rob, this has been great. I mean, I know we could probably go for another hour or two, and I know we will again.
I could.
I would definitely want to get you back on, and I definitely want to chat outside of this. So it's been a pleasure having you on, Rob. I'm gonna leave it with some final questions here. If you could, maybe kind of summarize sauna and what you want to pass down to that little one that you've been introducing to it. What would one thing be, to pass down?
It's just a part of daily life. That it's special, but it shouldn't it should be ordinary. It should be commonplace. It shouldn't be something people have to whisper like, "Oh, they're taking a sauna," or, "What are they doing in the sauna?" or whatever. It's just like, "Hey, I'm going out to the sauna." Should be just like saying, "Hey, I'm taking a shower." It's completely normalized. And maybe it'll get to the point when we're just like all the Finns I know don't even talk about it. You just mention it like, "Hey, I'm going out there." "Oh, I know where you mean."
Yeah.
And
The lamp is lit.
yeah, exactly. And that, hopefully she'll have one because she will. We actually just built one at the family cottage, which has been passed down now 2 or 3. It's Scarlett's family, 2 or 3 generations. And so Bella will be going there for, the rest of her life probably, and we put one in the basement. So there you go. So now it's a part of the whole family tradition, people coming together, all the cousins and stuff, and they can all take sauna together.
I think that really answers my question earlier. I asked about how do we think about sauna? How do we pass it on so that 40 years from now it's robust, it's not fading away? I think that's right. Like ordinary sauna. How do we make it an ordinary part of life?
Yeah. Maybe all of what we're doing now won't even matter at that point, right? It's just like, "Hey, I have one too." Yeah, you don't even talk about it. Like, do people talk about their bathrooms? Not really.
Kind of the problem that we are obviously having is that got quite many people, they only access what they think is a good sauna is at their gym. And very, very, very many people come to us and tell that our gym, we have like a steam room, and then we have whatnot, an infrared cabin, and then we have a traditional sauna. And I've tried them, but the sauna is not for me. And 'cause it's so easy to say because there's actually like there's really no point to like that too much unless you like to read your newspaper in a lightly warmed up space.
I see that all the time. Yeah, or on their cell phone.
On their cell phone, yeah. That's also true.
Yeah.
But yeah, we are on a mission here. We are truly on a mission. Some of us build saunas, some of us talk about saunas, and some of us use them as much as they can.
And, I like to do all 3.
Yeah, you're
Well, Rob, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I mean,
Well, thank you for having me on.
yeah, no, this is great. I think, we need to have you as a little resource for the upper bench. We get asked a lot of questions, and, we love having professionals on hand in our network that we can refer to and we can ask, hey, let's ask a professional. Let's ask somebody that's been doing this, for a long time. Not just a drop in the pan here. So it is really cool, Rob. Thank you so much for being on. Any final thoughts?
Well, we just finished a class. We had people from all over the country, 12 people from all over the country. We've already got the next one is already got a waiting list. It's already full. People are just hungry for information, and we just love sharing it and trying to get more people building better saunas. So hopefully that will continue, just the whole educational aspect of it and engaging more and more people from it's great all over the place.
Well, anything we can do to help promote that, we definitely will. We'll hopefully be able to add some links and make sure that people know how to get a hold of you, as well as us. Make sure, guys, that you're following us, you're subscribing, you're doing all those fancy things to make sure that the SEO gods of the world are in our favor. We want to spread this content just like Rob does. We want to share the news of good sauna. So thank you all for a great episode here of the Upper Bench. Rob, we're going to talk to you again real soon.
I have one final question. So I am at the outskirts of New York City in Westchester County. So if I would order a whatever you call a basic sauna, it's probably like 6 by 7 or 7 by 7 or
7 by 8.
7 by 8, okay? So, is there like, how much money would I be giving you for the?
You should talk, but I mean, they are getting up there. So like 30,000 bucks,
I was gonna say 30. I was gonna suggest
to
30.
fit you a basic sauna. We lament the fact that they're not cheap.
You sell us about it.
You definitely need a sauna.
I know, I know. Yeah, everyone needs a sauna.
We're getting him one soon.
Yeah,
All right. Thank you guys. Have a great night. Out to the sauna.